Hello everyone, welcome to online education of Sir C. R. Reddy College of Engineering. So in the last class, we have seen one of the algorithm that is a general hydrothermal scheduling using a discrete time intervals. Now in this class, we will take the same algorithm that is quick recall and the continuation of the same algorithm that is general hydrothermal scheduling using discrete time intervals because this question is very important. Already I told you that in each and every year, out of the 4 sets, a minimum of 2 to 3 sets, you will get the same question. That is nothing but a general hydrothermal scheduling using discrete time intervals. So already I told you that in this unit, literally we have only one topic is there. The topic is nothing but a short-term hydrothermal scheduling based upon this algorithm. So once it is completed, we will take one more algorithm that is a short-range scheduling using penalty factors. We are very much familiar with these penalty factors already because we have done 2 derivations in the first unit. Similarly, we have done so many problems in the first unit. So that's why we are very much familiar with the penalty factors. So first we will go for quick recall of the first algorithm. So this is nothing but a basic representation of the hydro and thermal system. PGT means power generated in a thermal power plant. PGH means power generated in a hydro power plant, and PD is nothing but power demand. And coming to the water side, J is nothing but water inflow, and this X is nothing but a water reservoir, or it can represent the storage of the water, and this is a valve, and this is nothing but water discharge. Similarly, if you are considering the storage of the water, we need to consider a particular time period. It may be a day, or it may be a week, or it may be a month, or it may be a year. So based upon the time period, what we are taking, and we can represent the storage of the water into 2 categories. The first one is at the starting of the time period, similarly at the end of the time period. These two are nothing but represented by x of 0 and similarly x of 0. So the representation of the storage of the water is very important. So this is nothing but a basic representation. Now let's move to one more, that is what are the steps which are generally present in any algorithm, not only in discrete time intervals. In any algorithm, what are the steps are present? The first one is assumptions. So in order to solve any problem, we need to assume a sum of the points. Once we assume the sum of the points, we need to formulate our objective function. So what is the objective function in this case? So once you know the objective function, we need to formulate our constraints. Those constraints are called as operational constraints. So once you know the objective function and similarly operational constraints, automatically you can find auxiliary function. You can write auxiliary function, and that auxiliary function is also called as Lagrangian function or augmented function. But in this case, whatever the principle we are using, that is nothing but a discretization. So that's why in this case, we need to apply that principle. That is nothing but a discretization. For example, if you want to apply a penalty factor method, you may use a penalty factor method. Similarly, instead of applying the discretization principle, if you want to use gamma lambda iterations, then you can go for gamma lambda iterations procedure. But in this case, we are using a discrete time interval. So that's why whatever the objective function is there, similarly, whatever the operational constraints are there, for these two, we need to apply our discretization principle. Again, we need to redefine these objective function at the same time constraints. So that is nothing but next step. So once you redefine your objective function and operational constraints, then you may go for auxiliary function. That auxiliary function is called as Lagrangian function or augmented function. So once you write this auxiliary function, how to get the solution? So we need to differentiate this auxiliary function with respect to the dependent variables. So our next job is we must find out what are the dependent variables. So once you find out the dependent variables, just to do the differentiation with respect to the dependent variables to your Lagrangian function. Then automatically you will get a solution for this one. So once you got the solution, and the final thing is algorithm. So this is nothing but a general steps in any algorithm. But in this case, we are taking a discretization principle. So that's why we will stick to this principle, discretization. So first we will take assumptions. So what is the first assumption? The first assumption is nothing but if you assume a particular time period, so in that particular time period, the storage of the hydro reservoir is known quantity. So whatever the water is there in the reservoir, that is nothing but a known quantity at the time of the beginning, at the same time at the end of the time period. For example, if you assume 1 week of the time period, that is from Monday to, let me assume, from Monday to Saturday. Monday is nothing but at the beginning of the time period, and Saturday is nothing but at the end of the time period. So what is the amount of water which is available in the reservoir at the time of the Monday? Similarly, what is the amount of water which is available at the end of the time period means on this Saturday. So that is nothing but a known quantity. So this is our first assumption. And the next one is water inflow to the reservoir. So how much water is incoming to the reservoir? That is nothing but J value. So J value is also known quantity. And the next one is load demand on the system is known for the entire period. For example, if you assume 1 week of time period, then you must know what is the total load which is present on the system. So these three are nothing but our assumptions. So once you assume these 3 points, then we'll go for objective function at the same time constraints. What is the objective function here? Let me explain by taking a simple diagram, that is a basic representation of the scheduling of these two different sources. PGT is nothing but power generated in a thermal power plant. PGH is nothing but power generated in a hydro power plant. And PD is nothing but demand. So according to our assumptions, PD value is nothing but known value, and J value is also a known value because J is nothing but water inflow. It is also a known value. And coming to the reservoir or storage values, these are also nothing but known values. X dash at the same time X sub 0. X sub 0 is nothing but at the end of at the beginning of the time period, and X dash is nothing but at the end of the time period. These two are also known values. But our main objective is we need to find out water discharge. How much water discharge is to be allowed in order to generate this PGH in such a way that the cost of this PGH must be minimum. This is nothing but our objective. Understanding everybody? So our main objective is we know J value, and we know the storage values, and we know PD values also. Main objective is how much water is to be discharged from this valve in order to generate this hydel power in such a way that this PGT must be minimum. PGT must be minimum means the fuel cost of the PGT must be minimum. So this is nothing but our objective. So like this, we need to operate, or like this, we need to discharge our water from this valve. So this is nothing but our main objective. So based upon this point, we can classify or we can form our objective function. That is nothing but, this is our objective function. Our objective function is we need to minimize the fuel cost of the thermal power plant. But here the most important point is why we are considering here integral. So when we are coordinating thermal power plant at the same time hydel power plant, the most independent quantity is time. Because why we are considering time as an independent parameter, the most important constraint in this case is water availability. Water availability may be present or may not be present. It is changes with respect to the time. So that's why we need to consider a time intervals from starting to ending. We need to consider in each and every time interval. So that's why here we are taking a continuous time from 0 to t, where t is nothing but it may be a 1 day, it may be a 1 week, or it may be a 1 month, or it may be a 1 year. So that's why we need to consider a continuous time. So it means integral. This is nothing but objective function. And coming to the constraints. So how to write here constraints? Already I told you that in the previous class, that is power balance equation. So what is the power balance equation? Generation must be equals to demand plus loss. So PGT is nothing but power generated in a thermal power plant. PGH is nothing but power generated in a hydro power plant. These two must be made your demand and loss. So this is nothing but power balance equation. We are representing these powers in a continuous time. So that's why in brackets we are using here T. This is nothing but a continuous representation. And one more thing is water availability. So how to write water availability here? X dash of T minus X dash of 0 minus, this is nothing but water inflow, and this is nothing but water outflow, or we can say water discharge. Already explained how to write this equation. And in this class also, again, I will explain how to write this equation. And one more constraint is hydropower generation. This is already I told you in the previous class, that is, this is nothing but the function of storage of the water and discharge. Because when you are considering the power generation in the hydel power plant, The most important thing is head. Head is depends upon water storage. So that's why we can say this is nothing but power generation in the hydropower plant. It is a function of water storage at the same time discharge. These three are nothing but a constraints which we are taking in this problem. But the most important problem in this case is, let me tell you that how to write that water availability constraint. For example, let us consider here reservoir, and X naught is nothing but initial storage of the water. Initial storage of the water, and after some time, when we are considering the water inflow to the reservoir, then water level is increases from X naught to X dash. And coming to the discharge or outflow, it is nothing but XU. So X naught is nothing but water storage in the reservoir at the initial stage, and X dash is nothing but water storage at the end of the time period, and J is nothing but inflow to the reservoir, and Q is nothing but outflow or discharge from the reservoir. So from these four parameters, we have to write X dash in terms of remaining three parameters. So how we can write is, this is nothing but already present in this reservoir. X naught is nothing but already present in the reservoir. When you are forgetting this X naught, so the water content is J and Q only. The J amount of water is incoming and Q amount of water is outgoing. Then in terms of J and Q, if you want to write the net amount of water which is stored in the reservoir, how we can write? Simply input minus output only. That means J minus Q only. So finally, how we can write is X dash is nothing but X naught plus J minus Q. This X naught is nothing but already stored in the reservoir. And the J is nothing but input to the reservoir, mean how much water is incoming to the reservoir, and Q is nothing but how much water is discharging from the reservoir. That means output. So finally, we can write this equation. So from this, we can write your water availability constraint. So that's why repeatedly I'm saying that no need to remember any equation, no need to by heart any equation. We need to understand concept, how we can write the equations, minus or plus symbols. So once you understand this concept, then automatically you can write this equation from this logic. And similarly, one more representation is, this is a reservoir and this is a turbine. And whatever the basic storage is there, or dead storage there, the difference in between dead storage to turbine, this height is nothing but a basic head, and it is represented with H naught. This is one more representation of the basic head, or we can say minimum height. So once it is completed, we can go for need of discretization principle. So already I explained in the previous class why we need to consider a discretization principle. For example, let me take a small example. I'm taking here a circle. If I ask you to find out the length of the circle or perimeter of the circle. So for this, if you don't know any formula for this one, and for this, if I provide one scale to you, so how it is possible to find out the length of the perimeter or the length of the circle is, it is not at all possible, because the circle is not in a linear shape. This is nothing but a non-linear shape. So how it is possible to find out the length of the circle by using only a linear scale? It is not at all possible. So that's why what I will do is, I will cut this circle into so many pieces. And those pieces are nothing but in terms of linear shape. These strips are nothing but linear shape. Now easily I can calculate the length of each strip. So I can calculate the length of this strip. I can calculate the length of this part. Similarly, I can calculate the length of this part. So finally, what I will do is, I will add all the lengths of the subintervals, all the lengths of each sections. Then automatically I will get the solution. But the thing is, definitely some difference is there between a continuous signal and discrete signal. This is nothing but a continuous signal, and this is nothing but a discretization principle. But let's see what is the difference between a continuous signal and discrete signal. So when you are considering this continuous, it becomes more complex, because we cannot find directly the length of the perimeter or length of the circle. But when you divide this total circle into some intervals, then automatically it becomes somewhat flexible. So in this case, easily we can calculate the length of the circle. So that's why you can say it is more complex and it is flexible. Similarly, if you want to solve the continuous problem, it takes a lot of time. But if you want to solve a discretization problem, it takes very less time, because nowadays all the things, all the devices which are based upon the discretization principle are only, means digital logic only. So easily we can solve these problems by using a computer. It takes a very less time and it is nothing but a flexible. But coming to the continuous, it becomes more complex and it takes a very high time to solve. And one more thing is, the most important thing is, but in this case you will get accurate result, but in this case you will get approximate solution, because somewhere you will get some error in between these so many subintervals. So that's why, that point here you may get approximate solution. Okay, so this is nothing but a basic difference between a continuous signal and a discrete signal. Now we need to apply this discretization principle to our a continuous objective function, at the same time a continuous constants. So let's go for that one. So whatever the objective function is there in continuous, we need to redefine this objective function from continuous to discrete. So how we can redefine is like this. This Ft and Ct are nothing but simply the representation of the fuel cost functions, and the sigma m equals to capital M. It is nothing but lower limit and capital M is nothing but upper limit. Already we have seen these lower limit and upper limit in the previous classes. And this is nothing but fuel cost function of the thermal power plant, where a small m represents particular interval. It may be third interval, it may be fifth interval, it may be seventh interval. But this m value must be varies from minimum value to capital M value, because capital M is nothing but here maximum number of subintervals. So that's why the small m varies from a lower limit to maximum m value. So like this, you can convert this objective function in a continuous into objective function into a discrete form. Similarly, we can convert our constraints from continuous to discrete. So we will see one by one. The first one is power balance equation. So when you are considering the power balance equation, you can write like this: PGTM plus PGHM minus PLM minus PDM is equals to 0, because PGTM means power generated in a thermal power plant in mth interval. Similarly, PGHM is nothing but power generated in a hydro power plant in mth interval. For example, when you are considering m equals to 5, PGH5 means power generated in a hydro power plant in fifth interval. Similarly, PD5 means power demand in a fifth interval. Similarly, PGT5 is nothing but power generated by a thermal power plant in fifth interval. So like this, we can write our power balance equation from continuous to discrete. So already we know what is the meaning of PGT and PGH and PL and PD. So this is nothing but PGTM, PGHM and PDM, and similarly PLM. PLM is nothing but transmission lines. And from our first unit, easily we can write the loss function for the PL. So this is nothing but our loss function when we are considering the two power plants. Similarly here, we are taking two sources, that is nothing but thermal source at the same time hydro source. When we are considering the two sources, how we can write the equation? This one. That is nothing but PLM is nothing but BTT PGTM square plus 2 into BTH PGTM PGHM plus BHS into PGHM square. This BHS and BTT are nothing but self coefficients. PGTM means power generated in a thermal power plant in mth interval. Similarly, PGHM means power generated in a hydro power plant in mth interval. So already we have come across the total terminology. So this is nothing but power balance equation. Next, we will go for one more constraint, that is water availability constraint. So this is nothing but water availability constraint. So this is X1M is nothing but represents at the end of the time period what is the amount of water, and this is nothing but at the beginning of the time period what is the amount of water, and J is nothing but inflow and Q is nothing but outflow, and delta T is nothing but the time interval in that particular time in that particular interval. So when we want to simplify this expression, just divide the total equation with the delta T. So when you divide the total equation with the delta T, you will get this equation. So when you divide the total equation with the delta t, your first term becomes x1m by delta t. The term is nothing but xm. Similarly, your second term, let us consider your second term. Your second term becomes x1 of m minus 1 divided by delta t. That term is nothing but x of m minus 1. So like this, we can rewrite this equation into like this. So this is nothing but our rewrite equation in terms of water availability. And one more constraint is hydro generation. So already we know hydro generation is completely depends upon the head, and it is nothing but storage, and it is nothing but water discharge. So when you are observing this equation, easily you can understand that this PGHM is completely depends upon water head and water storage and water discharge, where H0 is nothing but 9.81 into 10 power minus 10 H1 dash. Already explained what is the meaning of H0. H0 is nothing but a basic water head tap. Okay. And one more thing is, E is nothing but one of the factor. It is nothing but head correction factor. So from the practical values only, we can get this value, E value. And one more important term is here, rho value. So what is the meaning of rho value means, even though if you operate your hydro power plant under no load condition, for the satisfaction of in order to meet your basic purposes like drinking water and agriculture purpose, we need to discharge some of the water. So that means here rho represents non-effective discharge. It represents water discharge needed to run hydro generator at no load. So that is the meaning of rho value. So easily, finally, what we can say is PGHM is completely depends upon water head and water storage and water discharge. So this is nothing but basic formula. Already I told you in the previous classes on what factors our power generation in hydropower plant is going to dependent. Okay, so this is nothing but our third constraint. So now we have objective function is there in discontinuous manner. Similarly, we have three constraints are there in discontinuous manner. And the next thing is we need to formulate into mathematical representation. So first, let me take up our general mathematical representation. For example, when you have the only one constraint, how to write your mathematical representation? That is nothing but objective function plus lambda into constraint. When we are having only one constraint, you can write like this. When you have the two constraints, how can you write like this? You can write like this. Objective function plus lambda 1 into constraint 1 plus lambda 2 into constraint 2. Similarly, when you have three constraints, how you can write like this. Objective function plus lambda 1 into constraint 1 plus lambda 2 into constraint 2 plus lambda 3 into constraint 3. But in this case, how many constraints we are having? We are having three constraints totally. The first one is power balance equation, second one is water availability constraint, and the third one is hydropower generation. So that's why we need to consider here third equation. By using third equation, we can write our mathematical representation for this algorithm. So for this, in order to get the solution for this one, we need to use here non-linear programming at the same time gradient method also. I will tell you why we need to use a gradient method. Till now we have used only non-linear programming only, but in this case, along with the non-linear programming, we need to use a gradient method also. So within a short time, I will tell you what is the necessity of gradient method for this solution. So here, how many constraints are there? Three constraints are there. So that's why we have to use here lambda 1, similarly lambda 2 and lambda 3 also. So when you put all these power balance equation and water availability constraint and hydropower generation on the objective function in one equation, you can write like this. This augmented function you can write as sigma of, this is objective function. What is our objective function? To minimize the fuel cost of the thermal power plant. So that's why we can write here C of PGTM. This is nothing but objective function. And lambda 1 m into one constraint. This is power balance constraint. And lambda 2 into one more constraint. What is the here constraint? Water availability constraint. And lambda 3 into one more constraint. And this is nothing but hydropower generation constraint. So simply we can write objective function plus lambda 1 into one constraint plus lambda 2 into one more constraint plus lambda 3 into one more constraint. But here, why we are using here minus? So already I told you that our power balance equation is nothing but generally PD minus PL, PD plus PL minus power generation. But here we have just rewrite this equation. So that's why we got here minus. So otherwise, you will write here plus into lambda 1 m PD plus PL minus of generation. Then you can write like this. It completely depends upon your wish. Plus lambda 2 into second constraint plus lambda 3 into one more constraint. This is nothing but our auxiliary function, or we can say augmented function. So from this, we need to get the solution. How to get the solution? We need to differentiate. We need to differentiate this auxiliary function with respect to dependent variables. Now, tell me what are the dependent variables are there in this particular equation. When you are considering this particular equation, PGTM is nothing but one of the dependent variables. Similarly, PGHM is also nothing but one of the dependent variables, and XM is also nothing but one of the dependent variables, because PGTM means power generated in a thermal power plant. It is not independent. Similarly, PGH is nothing but power generated in a hydro power plant. It is also not independent factor. And one more parameter is X. X is nothing but storage. Storage is also not at all independent parameter, because it is completely depends upon water inflow. So that's why in this case, in this equation, we can consider PGTM, PGHM and XM are nothing but dependent variables. So with respect to these three, we need to differentiate our auxiliary function. So one by one, we will consider one by one dependent variables, so that we will go for a partial differentiation. Now in this case, how many dependent variables are there? Totally 3 different variables are there. The first one is the power generated in a thermal power plant. The first function is nothing but dou L by dou PGTM. And the second one is power generated in a hydro power plant, dou L by dou PGA. This is nothing but power generated in a hydro power plant. And one more a dependent variable is nothing but water storage. That is nothing but XM. So we need to find out all these 3 equations and make it to equals to 0. These are nothing but KT conditions. KT condition means Kuhn-Tucker conditions. So first, let me take one by one. This is nothing but our main function. And the first one is, we need to differentiate this auxiliary function with respect to PGTM. Then what equation you will get? Let's see here. So dou L by dou PGTM is equals to, and this is nothing but a normal differentiation of the objective function. Already I told you in the previous classes, what is the difference between a partial differentiation and normal differentiation? Means in what cases we will go for partial differentiation, in what cases we'll use a normal differentiation. For example, when you consider the first function, objective function, it is completely depends upon PGTM only. And we need to differentiate this one with respect to PGTM only. So that's why in this case, directly you can go for a normal differentiation. Minus lambda 1m into this one becomes 1. And this one 0. And PDM is also 0, because PGH and PD is not at all, it depends on PGTM. So that's why these 2 terms become 0. And one more term is there, that is PLM. It is depends upon PGTM. So that's why here you will get the term dou PLM by dou PGTM, and must be equals to 0. This is nothing but your first equation. So when you are doing a differentiation with respect to the PGTM, you will get like this. Similarly, one more a dependent variable is PGHM. So again, do the differentiation with respect to the PGHM. Then you will get this equation. The first term becomes 0, because the objective function is not at all depends upon your PGHM. So that's why our first term becomes 0, and this term becomes 0, and this term becomes 1, and this term becomes dou PL by dou PGHM, and this term becomes 0. So finally you will get here minus lambda 1m into 1 minus dou PL by dou PGHM. And similarly, when you are considering this water availability, all these terms completely independent of PGH. So that's why this term becomes 0 completely, lambda 2 term. And one more thing is lambda 3m into this term becomes 1. So finally you will get like this. When you are doing the differentiation of your auxiliary function with respect to the PGHM, then you will get like this. So from the first equation, we can get lambda 1m. And from the second equation, once you find lambda 1m, easily we can find out lambda 3m. So from these 2 equations, we can find out lambda 1, similarly lambda 3m. And one more equation is, we need to differentiate with respect to one more dependent variable, that is nothing but xm. So when you do the differentiation with respect to the xm, then you will get like this. So this is nothing but our third equation. So from this, we can calculate lambda 2 value. So from the previous two equations, easily we can calculate lambda well value, similarly lambda 3 value. And from this equation, we can calculate lambda 2 values. So this is nothing but half of the solution, or we can say 80% of the solution. And one more thing is, in order to get the solution, we need to find out lambda 1m, similarly lambda 3m, and similarly lambda 2m, or we can say lambda 2 1. So once it is completed, here the point is we need to use a gradient concept. Why we need to use a gradient concept is, for example, when you are considering these three equations, the first equation and the second equation and the third equation, these are nothing but highly nonlinear equations. These are nothing but highly nonlinear equations. In order to get a feasible solution, try to remember or try to understand these equations. In order to get solution for highly nonlinear equations, we can say in order to get feasible solutions. In this case, we need to go for a one more approach, or we can use a one more method. That is nothing but gradient method. So what is my gradient? Gradient is nothing but a first order derivative. So that's why when you are applying a gradient concept, we need to differentiate our Lagrangian function with respect to the control variable. What is the control variable here? Q. Q means here discharge. Easily by operating your valve, or by controlling your valve, easily we can control our discharge. So that's why when you are doing a partial differentiation of your Lagrangian function with respect to the control variable, that is Q, then you get here gradient vector. For optimality condition, this vector must be is equals to 0. So this is nothing but our final solution for this algorithm. Why we are using a gradient concept means, even though if you do the partial differentiation with respect to the dependent variables, those equations are also nothing but highly nonlinear equations. But practically, we cannot solve those highly nonlinear equations within a short time. So that's why in order to get a feasible solution within a short time, we will use here gradient concept. What is the purpose or what is the meaning of a gradient means? It is nothing but a first order derivative with respect to the control variable. So this is nothing but a first order derivative with respect to control variable. So here, what is the control variable here? Q. That is nothing but discharge. So that's why do the partial differentiation with respect to the control variable and make it to equals to 0. Then automatically we will get the final solution. This is nothing but a final solution for this algorithm. This algorithm is very, very important for your final examination. Definitely you will get this question in your final examination, at least for 2 to 3 sets of paper. Okay, let's go for the next topic. Totally, we have 4 algorithms are there. Those are nothing but scheduling based on energies and based upon the discrete time intervals. So we have completed these 2 topics. And one more 2 algorithm is based upon the gamma lambda iterations and based upon the penalty factors methods. So already we are very much familiar with the penalty factors. That's why instead of completing short range scheduling using penalty factors completely, what I will do is I will summarize this method. That is short range scheduling using penalty factors. And this method is also called as Kirchmeyer's method. This is nothing but a scientist name. Okay, this method is also called as a scientist name. And this is exactly same as that of your first unit. How we did the same derivation in the first unit, the same procedure we will follow here also. The reason it is, out of these 4 algorithms, we have only second algorithm is there. And first order algorithm is also not there according to our curriculum. But still, I covered the first algorithm. The reason here it is, one time it was asked in your previous PSUs. So that's why I covered the first algorithm. That is nothing but scheduling based on energies. And coming to your university curriculum, it is enough to prepare only second algorithm. It is only prepare only second algorithm itself. Okay, no need to prepare first algorithm, third algorithm, and fourth algorithm. But sometimes in your university questions also, they are asking for 2 marks questions based upon the penalty factor method. So that's why I'm taking a overview of the penalty factor. So how to represent your without losses? Let's try to remember your first unit. What are the final condition when we are considering when we are neglecting the losses? So this is nothing but our final condition. What is the difference between your first unit and this unit? Is only gamma only. This is nothing but gamma only. When you are considering the without losses, how we are written is df by dp is equals to lambda, where f is nothing but incremental fuel cost. Similarly, I already told you that either you can use f or you can use c also. And if you want to represent thermal power plant, we can write here dc or df by dpgt. It must be equals to lambda. Lambda is nothing but incremental fuel cost. Already we have seen in the first unit. Similarly, if you come to the water power plant or hydel power plant, how to write your incremental fuel cost is nothing but dw by dp is must be equals to lambda. But along with this term, we need to consider one more term, that is nothing but gamma. Why we need to consider this term is, the most important thing is, when you are considering the dc by dpgt, what is the meaning of dc by dpgt? It is nothing but incremental fuel cost with respect to the power generation. But coming to the hydel power plant, what is the meaning of incremental fuel cost? Here fuel is nothing but water. Even though if you increase the power generation, the incremental fuel cost is nothing but zero only, because your fuel is nothing but zero. But we are taking one more parameter, that is gamma. This gamma is called as fictitious cost for your hydel power plant. And what is the significance of this gamma is, it converts, listen very carefully, it is nothing but gamma is nothing but, it is called as fictitious cost of the hydro power plant. And the significance of the gamma is, it converts water inflow rate to the incremental fuel cost of the hydro power plant. Gamma is called as fictitious cost of the hydro power plant, and it converts from water inflow rate to the incremental cost of the hydro power plant. So that's why here we are taking one more parameter, that is nothing but gamma. This is in case of when we are considering the neglecting the losses. And the next case is with losses. With losses, what is the one more parameter is comes into the picture, that is nothing but penalty factor. So how we can represent this equation is, when we are considering the penalty factor is like this. Everything is same, the only difference is gamma. This is nothing but dc1 by dpgt into lt is equals to lambda. This is nothing but when we are considering the thermal power plant. Similarly, when we are considering the hydropower plant, this is nothing but hydropower plant equation, and it must be equals to lambda. The only thing is one more new parameter is gamma only. And what is the formula for penalty factor? That is nothing but 1 by 1 minus dou PL by dou PS. Everything is same. They accept only one difference is one more parameter is comes into the picture in case of hydropower plant. Already I told you that what is the meaning of gamma and what is the significance of gamma. When we are considering the incremental fuel cost with respect to power generation in case of thermal power plant, we need to consider here dc1 by dpgt. But if you want to say incremental fuel cost in case of hydropower plant, we cannot say incremental fuel cost. The reason here it is, here fuel is water. So that's why we cannot represent incremental fuel cost when we are considering hydropower plant. So that's why in order to represent incremental fuel cost, even though if you are considering hydropower plant, here we need to consider one more parameter, that is nothing but gamma C. So this parameter converts water inflow rate to the incremental fuel cost of the hydropower plant. So that's why here we need to consider one more parameter, that is nothing but gamma. Everything is same. And this is so many times it was asked in your university examination for 2 marks. So that's why I'm covering this overview of the penalty factor solution. So with this, we can complete all the algorithms. And one more last topic is advantages of the operation of the hydrothermal combinations. So before going to the technical point of view, already I told you that a simple example at the end of this second minute, that is nothing but usage of Activa and car by a common man. So when we have Activa and car, in what situations you will use car, in what situations you will use car, in two-wheeler. So already we have come across this concept. And based upon this point, we can understand that what are the advantages are there when we are considering the two sources at a time. That means hydrothermal combinations, or we can say hydrothermal coordination. The first one is flexibility. For example, try to implement these points with respect to this example. When you have the two sources, that is nothing but two-wheeler and four-wheeler. If you want to go for a longer distance with your family, then you may pick up a car. Similarly, if you want to roaming within the cities, then you may pick up a two-wheeler. Means some flexibility is there. Similarly, when you are considering the two sources, that is thermal power plant and idle power plant can be used as a base load and can be used as a peak load plant. And the most advantage which is present in your idle power plant is within a short time, we can put your idle power plant into operation. So that's why when we are considering two sources, we have a lot of flexibilities there. And next one is greater economy. When we are considering here hydro and thermal, already we have seen that why we are using hydrothermal combination. Here, what is the fuel cost here? Zero, hydro. So that's why when you're operating these two at a time, automatically we can minimize the fuel cost of the thermal. When we are minimizing the fuel cost of the thermal, automatically we can save a lot of budget. That means a greater economy. And one more thing is security of the supply. So here, when we're having a two vehicles, two-wheeler and four-wheeler, for example, if any one repair is there in one vehicle, then automatically what will you do? You will take one more vehicle and you will complete your task. Similarly, here also same thing. When we have the two sources here, then automatically you can meet your security of the supply. Yes, security of supply means here continuity of the supply, or you can say reliability of the supply. Then automatically we can meet reliability of the supply. And next, one more thing is better energy conservation. For example, if you are considering a rainy seasons, we have plenty of water is there. So in that, what we will do is we can operate a hydropower plant at maximum condition. In such condition, we can reduce the power by the thermal power plant. So once you are reducing the power by the thermal power plant, what happens to our fossil fuels? So we cannot use such an extent so that automatically we can decrease the consumption of the fossil fuels. Similarly, if you come to the summer season, instead of the usage of the hydro, we can increase the thermal power generation. And whatever the less amount of water is there in that particular reservoir, we can use the limited water in order to meet our basic principles, like basic needs like drinking water, at the same time agriculture needs. So like this, when we have the two sources, we have a better energy conservation. Okay, and last one is reserve capacity maintenance. When you have the two sources at a time, then automatically we can have a minimum reserve capacity easily. So these are nothing but some advantages when we are taking two different sources at a time. So try to apply the same concept to your example. Okay, I'm not taking too much of time because I already explained very clearly at the starting of this second unit. So that's why I'm covering this same topic within a short time. Okay, and the next one is previous year's theoretical questions. So with this, we have completed your second unit theoretically, and now we will see your previous year theoretical questions. The first question is, what are the conditions for optimality in an optimal scheduling problem of a short range hydrothermal system with approximate penalty factor? Just now we have seen, when we are considering the penalty factors, what is the final condition when we are considering the losses, and similarly when we are neglecting the losses? Just now we have seen. So already I told you that that question is asked in your university questions for 2 marks. So these are nothing but 2 marks question. And next one is list out the scheduling methods for short-term hydrothermal condition. So we have already told you that 4 methods are there based upon the algorithm, that is nothing but based on the energies, based on the discrete time intervals, based upon the lambda gamma iterations, based upon the penalty factors. We have 4 types of methods are there based upon the algorithm. Similarly, based upon the time period, what we are considering, this algorithm is dividing into 2 types. Those are nothing but long-term scheduling and short-term scheduling. And the third one is, so again, it is nothing but a repeated question. What is the condition for optimality when we are considering time losses? And the next one is, what is the statement of optimization problem of hydrothermal system? So in this class itself, we have seen what is the statement for objective function, what is the statement when we are considering the constraints. So this is nothing but a 4th question. And these are nothing but a short answer questions when we are considering the last year questions. And similarly, when we considering the long answers, the first question is obtain the hydroelectric power plant models with the neat diagrams. Already explained, we have 4 types are there: reservoir type and pumped storage with the storage and without storage. So already we have seen 4 types of power plants. And the next one is derive the condition for optimality of short-term hydrothermal scheduling problem. So in this class itself, we have seen that derivation by considering the discretization principle. And the third question is also same thing. How to get the optimal solution when we are considering the short-term hydrothermal. So these are nothing but previous year questions and short answers and long answers. While I'm uploading this PPT in your WhatsApp group, I will provide these PPT slide numbers also, so that easily you can go through the answers for these questions. And these are nothing but our previous year's theoretical question. And from the next year class onwards, we will solve some of the problems, because the problem solving is very, very important for this unit, because directly they may ask 14 marks also in sometimes. So definitely you will get a 7 marks for theory and remaining 7 marks is for a problem. In some of the times, they're asking a complete 14 marks based upon the problem. So that's why we need to give some importance for the problems also. Okay, so this is nothing but our second unit. So with this, I will conclude today's lesson. Okay, thank you very much.